Hello, everyone. So apparently I can't use one of those fancy mics because my beard gets in the way, this is not the first time my beard has gotten in the way of something. So hello, I'm Harper. I would love you guys all to tweet at me and specifically follow me because someday I want to have a lot of followers. So this is my first way to do this. This is honestly why I'm here. Today, I'm very excited about this. I've never been to Berlin. This is really exciting. Thank you for watching. But I'm going to talk about 3 things. And they're pretty simple things. They are build a great team, practice failure, and then what I like to call micro-listening. So stick with it, and we'll talk about that. But first, let's talk about me. This is my favorite topic. Who knows who these guys are? Well, I want your hands up high. I want to see this. OK. That's good. That was my first computer, not that actual computer, but one much like it. And I got it when I was, I think, 6th grade? No, 6 years old. And I started programming around then with my little brother, and it was really fun. And right after that, well, not right after, but a couple years later, I read this book. How many have read this book? OK, that's a little disappointing. So go to Amazon.com. We all need to buy this book because, first of all, this book is a history book about hackers. It talks a lot about what a hacker is, and this is what a hacker is. I took this from Wikipedia, which is where I get all of my good content. Engaging in the hands-on imperative is, I think, a really important aspect of this. But some of the things we've heard about all today, sharing, openness, collaboration, are also a huge part of the hacker culture. And when I was, I don't know, 13 or 14, whenever I read that book for the first time, I started to really understand that this is something I loved. I love this about how do we pick this lock to see what's behind the door, but more importantly, to see if we could pick the lock. All that stuff's so exciting. So I decided I was a hacker. I have this slide for 2 reasons. One, because I've always wanted someone to call me a hacker, and I figured that was the easiest way for me to call myself a hacker, to have someone else call me a hacker. And 2, because hackers get a lot of bad press. But a lot of people are, how many people here think they are hackers? Okay, how many are coders? I'm also a coder, and I think you can use those things interchangeably. So a little bit of time passes since I read that book, and I joined this company called Threadless. How many here know Threadless? I know we're at a Spreadshirt-sponsored conference, but Threadless? Let's do it again. Sorry, I was, okay, good. So more people know Threadless. Now, if it was 10 years ago, there would be a lot less, and if it was 5 years ago, there would be more, which is the sad thing about companies, right? So the thing about Threadless is we invented crowdsourcing, but we didn't actually know we invented crowdsourcing. We went to this place, MIT, at a conference, and they were like, now we'll hear from the Threadless guys. You guys invented crowdsourcing. And we were like, crowd what? We had no idea what they were talking about because we were there just to do a very simple thing, which was to take this and make it into that. And we did it through 4 very, 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 very simple steps. The first one is a design. Someone like you guys uploads a design. That goes and you submit it, and then people score it, and then cash money falls from the sky. It's very, very easy. This is basically what happens. You get that change. It's really great. But we did this for about 10 years. It's still going in Chicago, really great organization. We had 100,000 designs or so when I left in 2009. We had millions and millions of votes, millions of T-shirts sold, and we grew from X millions to XX millions, which, since I'm not allowed to talk about revenue, is a really good way to talk about revenue. But the best part about crowdsourcing, and this is where it's really important, is we did none of the hard work. All we did was really take money and do logistics, which is pretty easy and pretty well defined. All of the design work were done by people like you guys, which is really exciting. Our team was able to focus on the product that facilitated that rather than focus on building all of these products over and over again, these T-shirts. And we heard about Quirky earlier. You know, we hear a lot of talk about Kickstarter. And around 2009, I realized that I had accomplished all of the goals that I wanted to accomplish. So I did the one thing that makes a lot of sense. I quit. And I went on a vision quest. How many know what a vision quest is? Okay, so you guys all need to go to a desert, find your spirit animal, and hang out for a while, and then someday you'll learn what a vision quest is. So for me, what that meant is I wandered around and I worked in venture capital for a little while, which was not quite as deserted as Mars, which is in the picture, but it was a really great opportunity for me to learn how startups worked. And so I was like, I'm going to do a startup. But then something fell from the sky, and the Obama campaign called and said, hey, we'd love a CTO, and we're looking at you. And I was like, well, that's really strange. This is the 2008 CTO, Michael Slaby. And Michael Slaby called me, and he actually, it's really interesting because I look at this email now, and it's just this email that says, hey, I'd love to meet up and just chat about some of the things we're trying to solve at the campaign. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's do that. So he was a CTO in 2008, but this is a CTO in 2012. Let's just take a look real quick at this again. I love this transition. Like, I think my 13-year-old and 14-year-old self would have died seeing this, been like, yes! Anyway, so I was a CTO in 2012, and in talking about this, there's a couple questions that started happening, that started coming up, and there was, I forget, sorry. How many know what YOLO means? I was really worried that this wasn't, because sometimes I use this slide and everyone's just like, what's that? But the real question is why Harper, and this comes up a lot. It doesn't come up as much now that we've won, but it definitely came up a lot before. And the reason is this, which since I can't read Japanese, I'll make it like this. Mochi wa mochi ya. And what this means is very simple. If you want rice cakes, you go to the rice cakes dealer. Or, to put it into engineering terms, if you want to do engineering, you need to hire engineers. Now, I have a WTF there because that doesn't seem too crazy, right? But in politics, this is pretty insane. Like, they don't hire engineers. Let's do it by this. How many countries do we have? All of them? Okay, let's act like we have all of them. Raise your hand if your country's political parties have CTOs. Okay, cool. We had about, for anyone not on stage, that was no one has CTOs. So my point is that you don't often have technologists inside of politics. And so when they asked me to join, they really were looking for a really important thing, which was someone to corral what I'm about to talk about. We hired 40 engineers. We hired them from all of these great companies, a little I heard earlier. I'd like to point everyone to the green one. We had one really important person come from that company. We had about 120 tech staff. Just to be very clear about the scale difference, in 2008 we had about 4 engineers. So we had probably maybe 12 to 20 technical staff. So that's a pretty big jump from 2008 to 2012. And of course we had 18 months, which is a lot longer than our opponents had. But we started from 0. And so we knew very early, although we would not admit it, that we were going to be raising about $1 billion. So imagine me coming from a t-shirt company, walking into a building, and they're like, okay, well, you're going to build $1 billion tech company. And I was just like, okay, let's try this out. And so we focused on the one thing that I knew how to do, which was execution. I knew how to execute like nobody's business. So this is an actual cake that we had made at the at the end of the campaign, and it was made like 4 or 5 days before Election Day, and no one would eat it. Because they were all like, well, I don't want to lose and have an eat the cake that said don't fuck it up. Like, we have to win to eat this cake. So it sat there, and then after Election Day, everyone ate it, which I thought was a really bad choice. So we had, we did one thing that, let me say this differently. We set out to execute, and to execute, we did what we know how to do, which was we built a platform. The platform was called Narwhal, and I'm going to try something new here. I thought it would be fun. This is Jim Messina dressed as a narwhal. Well, photoshopped. I call it dressed. And every Thursday we had a meeting with tech. And part of the problem with being an engineering group that was inside of a campaign that doesn't really have engineers is there's a really disparate. There's not a lot of trust. And so we did a lot to try and bridge that gap, that trust gap. And so one of the things we did a lot was we had a lot of fun. We tried to bring humor in there. So every Thursday, we photoshopped Jim Messina's head, the campaign manager, onto a different animal. This one was really funny because we made little buttons, and no one would wear them because it's so creepy looking. But since it's here be dragons, I thought this one would be really appropriate. And this was actually in a presentation for the executive staff of the campaign. But anyway, so let me go back to my presentation. Narwhal was a concept, and it was this really interesting concept where we set out and we said, hey, how do we execute fast? How do we execute at such a large scale? How do we make sure, honestly, that we don't fuck it up? Well, we knew that we had to do an API. And the reason we needed to build an API was because that API would allow us to build a foundation. And from there, we'd have the freedom to focus on the products that we needed to execute on. And those products are really important products that probably would be illegal in Germany. Call tool, dashboard, mobile apps, contribution apps, and social apps. Not that I have any judgments. We had about 200 deployed products. That means every single week we deployed onto our servers about 200 products. We had thousands and thousands of servers, and we focused aggressively on the technology that solved the problem. Failure was not an option. I mean, you can't. The fate of the world is at your hands. You know. Sorry. I mean, we saw what happened last time, right? Like, we have to kind of keep it together over there. You don't understand what it's like. So we focused on a couple of things. The first thing we focused on was user experience, because we did not want to fail. We needed to make sure that our users were as involved and as found the apps as useful as we built them. Like, I'll talk about a little bit about that later. And game day was another thing that we invested heavily in, which I'll talk about later. So we practiced failure for about a month. One whole month of the campaign was spent testing failure, our failure plans, how things worked, etc. But on E-Day, it was pretty chill. Everyone calmed down. This was a picture taken around E-Day. I forgot, no one calls it E-Day. It's Election Day. When you've been practicing for a thing forever, you say it all the time, I guess you shrink it. But we'd practiced and we'd thought about this for so long that we had no more changes. So by the time Election Day came around, we just kind of hung out. And so Election Day really was pretty chilled out. This used to say Election Day equals R&B, but then I always had to describe how we just listened to R&B that day. But anyway, so we won. We didn't have any big disasters, and it was pretty awesome to have this experience of working for 18 months for this thing and then achieving it. But politics is hard. So I'm going to tell a little bit of another little side presentation here. This is really short. It's 2 slides. Who knows who this is? Okay, so this is good. This is John Maeda. He's the head of RISD. He came into my office in this whirlwind of activity where they were like, hey, John's going to come in, and he probably wants an hour or 2 of your time, so we scheduled you. And it's like, oh, that's a lot of time, but that's fine. He's important, and he has a lot of cool things to say. And he came in and basically just said this, managed by your outbox, not by your inbox, and then literally ran out of my office. Which was really shocking to me because we'd interacted at Threadless a little bit, but having him do that, he basically came in and said, hey, I'm guessing you're in a pretty political environment, little p, not big P, and this really helped me at RISD. And so for any of you that are dealing with any problems internally to your organization, this is my advice to you, and I promise you it will work. It's very simple. If you have problems with any of your coworkers or salespeople or anyone, it's probably because they feel underserved by you. And so if you reach out to them preemptively, oftentimes they will respond in a way that is almost embarrassing. So this happened to me where I had a particularly difficult time with this one person, and I was like, well, why is that? Like, why is this person frustrated with me? And I just kept stewing on it and thinking about it. And then John runs into my office, runs out, and then like a week later, I'm like, fine, fuck it, let's try it out. So I email this dude, and I'm just like, hey, hope things are well. This project seems to be going well. How are things going for you? And he emailed me back and was like, oh my gosh, thank you for emailing me. And I was like, why are you thanking me? Well, obviously, he did not expect me to email him. He felt ridiculously underserved by me. And from then on, everything was much easier. So try it. Okay, back to your normal presentation. So I'm here to talk about 3 important lessons. The first one is build a great team. The second one, practice failure. And the third one is micro-listening. And then I'm going to drink water, and then we're going to continue. Don't you wish I had lasers taped under your chairs or something? Did everyone see that presentation? It was so awesome. Okay, so the first thing, build a great team. This is really important. How many work on a great team? I don't really know what to say about that. Okay, how many don't work on a great team? Okay, So I actually think it's more important than the people that raise their hand when they don't know, because that's a lot of self-awareness, and that's something that I value. So let's talk a little bit about great teams and how to build them. So the innovation on the campaign, the innovation at Threadless was the team. There was nothing more. We did a lot of cool technology. Technology didn't win the campaign. The team, all the team, like the executive team, everything, that's what won the election. Building a team is not easy. How many here have built teams? How many here thought it was really easy? Okay, so those people are liars. We can put them over there. There'll be more ways to get rid of the liars in a minute. So pruning is one of the first steps. And this is a really hard step for me personally because it involves firing people. The first thing you have to do if you're trying to build a good team is fire people who are not good in the team. I love talking about this because at Threadless we fired someone, and then I hired him at the campaign. Because he was a great engineer, he just didn't fit at that point, and he fit later incredibly well at the next point. This doesn't mean that you're getting rid of them or that they're dead or anything like that. It just means that they're currently not working. And so trying to make them work, trying to waste time with your business, trying to make them fit, is just don't do it. Just get rid of them. Next one is ABC. Does anyone know this movie? Has anyone seen it? Glengarry Glen Ross? Okay, I have not seen it, so I shouldn't use it on my slides, but I don't care. The idea here is always be closing. You've heard that before, right? Yes? Okay, active audience. The next one is always be creative. This is really important. I hear a lot of pitches from startups. I do a lot of work with startups, and oftentimes they're like, Harper, how do I find engineers? And it's like, well, act like you're pitching me. And they're like, well, we have a really cool Ruby on Rails startup, and we do need stuff in Chicago. And you're like, well, that's really boring, first of all. And second, that's every single startup in Chicago. So you need to add more. You need to say more great things about your company. And I'm not talking like there's free Fritos or whatever, or you have foosball or any bullshit like that. I mean, you really need to say, we are trying to solve the world's problems, and that problem is X. And you can help us because we have a scaling problem that would open up our market and whatever. And then people are like, engineers just want cool problem sets. They don't want to actually, you say Ruby on Rails, they're going to be like, oh, cool. But if you say, well, we happen to need to grow Ruby on Rails to this big thing because we have this opportunity, et cetera, they're going to be like, okay, suddenly there's a problem set and I can solve it. That's because engineers are always very ego-based. The other thing here is something that I talk about a lot, which is A's hire A's and B's hire C's. This is something where you need to practice this. How many here are A's? Come on. Anyway, yeah, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Now, the funny thing is the previous couple slides all powered by Donald Rumsfeld. Not kidding. These are all from Rumsfeld's rules. I found that ironic after I read it. Didn't know. So the next one is trust. Trust is really important. There's a lot of examples of why trust are important. This is one of the parts of my presentation where I have a lot of stories for me why trust is important, but I think this is something that is so personal to the teams. I'd love you guys to think about why trust is important and either tweet them at me, email them to me, or just tell them to me after. I love to hear your guys' stories, and remember, I'm at Harper, and follow me. The next one is measure everything. Measurements, who here is pro metrics? Okay, that's, more hands should be up, guys, come on. Metrics drive everything. Okay, so metrics, the reason metrics are good are for two reasons. One, if you're trying to build a team, I forgot, I have diversity slide there. That's a really important one. I'll talk about that again in a second. But if you're trying to build a team, metrics help you power what I'll talk about in 4 more slides. So diversity, let's talk about diversity a second. Well, actually, I'll talk about it and you guys listen. Don't be afraid to hire people that look different than you. This is really important, hugely important. And it's not easy. On the campaign, I pretty much failed. Everyone I hired looked roughly like me. Now, I tried really hard, and so this kind of told me a couple things. First of all, it's very hard to find women in the web space that are interested in working in a very crazy job that have 8 to 10 years of experience. This is silly. It shouldn't be hard. We need to make it easier. So I have 2 ways to make this easier. The first one is try. That's the first one. And the second one is talk about it, because there's very few companies here who are actually killing it. In the States, Etsy is doing a really good job of trying to open it up and hire more women. And the thing is they're talking about it. So then other companies are looking at that as an instruction set on how to do this, how to offer more diversity. And there's a couple really good reasons on how to do this, or why to do this. And the first one is, I think that the internet is democratization of access. Strangely, not everyone using the internet is like a white dude from Chicago with a red beard. So we need to make sure that the people who are building the products also look like the people who are using the products. This will also help you with your user experience, help you with everything about it. And it's really important that you guys do this. It will not get easier until we all try. So back to metrics and why you should do that. Success will really help you. Metrics really help you measure success and push success out to your team. Practicing and celebrating success will make your team very happy. We did this every Friday where we had a meeting that was just talking about successes. And all we did was sit in a room and someone said, hey, this is what I did this week. And they showed us and they demoed it. And then we were able to give them a little bit of credit. And from there, everyone was really excited because everyone in the whole room got to see what everyone was working on and what they valued. And together as a group, it was incredible. But there's one thing that also had to do with, and this is probably the most important thing for having a great team, which is shipping. How many of you have a product that is amazing, but nobody has seen it? I know there's more hands out there. This is like the reverse layer test. Okay, so my challenge for you is, I don't know what day it is, but if it were close to a weekend, you should ship it by Monday. I think it's really important. Just push it out there. It'll be fine. I promise. Your team will love it. But building a team is really hard. It's worth the difficulty because it usually powers your products. So let's move on to the next one. Practicing failure. I think that this is the most awkward section because of this next slide. Failing sucks, right? Everyone knows that, and this is the really awkward one, but I can't figure out a better way to say it. We need to work hard at being terrible at it. Like, we need to fail at failing. And I have a couple ways that we did this, and I think that'll work for you guys as well, which is, the first one is user experience. How many love user experience professionals? Okay, that seems about right. They're like product managers. So the reason I made that joke is because oftentimes user experience professionals are a pain in my butt. And the reason for that is because they're like, hey, the users don't really like this. And I'm just like, well, the users are dumb. And they're like, no, the users are the users. And I'm just like, oh, right. And then we fix it. But if you engage from if you go to the front of that line and you say, we are going to engage and really invest in user experience from the beginning, then you don't have that kind of silly conversation. And the reason that it's important to talk to users is very simple. The difference between functional and usable lies with the users. I can build a functional anything. I'm sure any one of us in this room can build functional things. But the difference between functional and usable is the feedback that we get from the users. So do that. We did a lot with A/B testing to make sure we were doing things correctly, and we did everything wrong. Which one did you guys prefer? Sorry. So has anyone seen this movie, Groundhog Day? Okay, Groundhog Day is great because Groundhog Day is just a movie about multivariate testing. That is all it is. It has nothing to do with, there's no plot other than, that's it. So I was watching it with my wife, who's in the audience over there, and I was like sitting there, and I was like, oh my God. And I tweeted that, and I think it has the most retweets of anything I've ever said. Because it's so true. Like, you watch it, and all he does is he's like, he does something, and it doesn't work, and he goes back the next day and does it, and it doesn't work. And then if you Google it, there's whole blogs about how long he's spent in that world. It's something like 500 years. Which, it's a really long time. So anyway, I forgot to talk about this slide. A/B testing really allowed us to understand where we were wrong, and we were wrong all the time. And I think that's the thing that really surprised me. In the very beginning, the email team and the digital team under Teddy Goff, they did this thing where they would do bets on which subject line would work. And so every day they would get up and they would say, okay, here's the subject lines we're going to do. Who thinks this one's going to work? Who thinks this one's going to work? And then they'd bet. No one ever won, ever. These are the people who ran the email for the campaign. They were the best at email in the world, and they could not guess what the users wanted. So only through testing and through metrics were we able to actually establish what the right path was. This is another thing that we like to take from Etsy, which is this idea of always rolling forward. How many of you guys roll back code? Be proud. You should not do that. You should just fix it and increment the version number. And the reason you should do that because rolling back sucks for you, it sucks for the users, and nobody likes it. But everyone likes deploying new code. So it's much happier, and this is what we did. We pushed everything forward. If we screwed something up, which we did all the time, we just kicked out a new version, and we built our software and our infrastructure around this. It was a really important thing that's really small and a little nuanced. And fail safety. So early in the campaign, I had this opportunity to go see the space shuttle. Has anyone in the room seen the space shuttle launch back in the day? I mean, on TV? Well, just to make you feel better, in the US, it's the same number of people. It's like no one went. My whole point is it was crazy, man. They put a guy on the top of that, and they shot it up in the air. It was insane. But because it was insane, they had this idea of fail safety, which is really important. The idea is when they strap that dude in that little spaceship thing, and they put it on the other spaceship thing, and it shoots into the air, that it can come back down and the people don't die. That's the goal. And they did it a bunch of times where the people didn't die. And so, I guess you can't win them all. But it really it was this idea that you are practicing fail safety. You have 2 landing gear for every 1 landing gear. You have 2 systems for every system, sometimes 3 or 4. And so I don't understand why we don't do this for users. How many Rails apps in the room? Okay. Based on the sponsorship, how many Microsoft apps? Okay. What do you guys build apps in? There's like 2 people who have apps. Okay, let's just act like everyone said Rails. I'm guessing that you guys have the default error pages for whatever framework you're using. Yes? The 500 page? Yes, probably. And the reason I'm guessing that is because every single person does this. The idea that we practiced was if there is an error on our systems, no matter what it is, the user should never see it as an error. They should see it as a push to another product. So for instance, for us, we had a call tool which allowed our users to call various constituents and try and get more people involved. If there was an error there, it should just bounce them somewhere else where they can do work. Because the user is already saying, I want to do work. So why would we stop them with a simple error because we made a mistake? They haven't made a mistake, so let them continue on to where they want to go. We did this through and through. We did it with various degraded service levels. So you would start at the top, and maybe there was a nice, rich, really a lot of info on a map, and then our databases would get overwhelmed, and we just take away the map. The users would never know. And what that allowed is it allowed our systems to change with users, would change with failure, and the users were never affected. So we practice what I call user fail safety, which I invite you guys to do as well. But there's one thing which is most important, which is practice. We would never know any of this worked if we hadn't practiced. And we did this through what we called game days, which many people might call tabletop exercises. There's many words for this. And all this means is that we constantly destroyed everything. And so what we would do is we used Amazon Web Services. Any Amazon Web Service users? Okay, how do you guys have Amazon Web Services accounts, but no one has any applications written in anything? Anyway, we used Amazon Web Services, and because everything was automated, we just made another copy slightly next to it, and then we would just take various parts of it down. So we'd say, well, how does this work without a database? How does this work without queues? How does this work without our web servers? And we made sure that every question that we had was answered. So then when Election Day came along and something failed, or a hurricane hit the entire United States, as happened right before the election, or more importantly, Amazon had a little bit of an outage, we were not affected at all because we knew every single thing. We just had to turn to page like 33, read it out of the book, and say, okay, type this in, you type that in, and then it's fine. That was the whole goal, and that's what we got to. And it caused us to have no downtime. And we won. So this is my favorite part of this talk. Let's see. So one of our biggest innovations was data. And this is where I'm going to talk about microlistening. So how many love big data? How many love the words big data and not actually big data? Because as far as I can tell, most people have no idea what they're talking about. Not you guys, of course. I'm just saying, sometimes in other places I've talked, some people don't really know what they're talking about but they like to say big data. And I'm looking at one specific group, the media. They have no idea what they're talking about. Sorry, media. No, I'm not sorry. So let's look at this Google search real quick. Obama campaign data. That seems like a pretty good Google search. Now, this is really boring. Let's look at this one. Obama campaign micro-targeting. I have no idea what that even means. Like, really? So, micro-targeting is obviously really exciting. I guess, I mean, I'm in Germany. You guys would have the same response, right? This is a really interesting tweet for a couple reasons. One, who knows Dan Sinker? Okay, good. One person. But Dan Sinker, you guys should all follow him. He's an amazing commentary, works for Mozilla, great guy. But he sent this tweet in October 08 when we were sending so much emails, and we only sent more emails from 08. And so we just continued sending them. But this is an example email. So do you like how nicely the numbers increment? Oh yeah, 56. What we did is we'd look at my giving history, and then we would say, oh, 56 seems like a likely number Harper would give, and I did. Add Facebook to this a little bit. So my friend John Ruth lives in North Carolina, and we just connected with Facebook and then sent me an email that says, hey, you should maybe get John to vote, because we're not really sure if he voted yet. We did this with text, with SMS. So we had a short code that we would send SMSs out, and we'd oftentimes do it through an email like, hey, text this to give, or text to subscribe, and then we'd send an email that says, hey, critical fundraising deadline, and then you donate $5, and it was all through your credit account. But when I first heard about this is what I totally thought was going to happen, because it just seems like it could be really sketchy, right? But it turns out that it works incredibly well. Worked so well that we use it on New Year's Eve, right? So this is basically what it was like. But this is totally what I again imagine would happen, right? Like, because you'd be like, yeah, I'll give $56. That sounds great. But all of these things you saw raised boatloads of dollar bills. Once again, cash money falling from the sky. And it also allowed us to do much better content distribution. We were able to push out content that said, hey, your friend John Ruth needs to vote. It allowed us to make sure that we were organizing on social networks, Facebook, et cetera, in a way that was personal, in a way that actually affected our users, in a way that got action. And because I'm in Germany, no one said it was creepy, except the press. We had higher voter contact efficiency, because when I got that email that said John needs to vote, I could call John up and say, yo, dude, you should vote. And they knew that because it was a strong tie. I was his friend on Facebook. They looked at it and they said, hey, there's a lot of pictures of John and Harper together, et cetera. There's a lot of connection here. We need to make these two people talk. But it's, it's pretty cool, right? However, there's one thing that's missing though. Who knows? We're bad listeners, right? Like, that's the thing I don't like about this stuff, and that's the thing that the campaign did really well. Who knows this guy? Okay, more people should know this guy. Come on, less people knew this guy than John Maeda. This is crazy. This is Tim O'Reilly. Who knows O'Reilly Books? Okay, there you go. Tim O'Reilly said to me, hey, you should stop focusing on micro-targeting. You should start focus on micro-listening. The idea being that you need to make that feedback loop, that communication loop, as short as possible. So instead of me sending a banner ad to someone that's exactly targeted to their needs, which we see every day on the internet, we need to make sure that you're having a conversation. So how do we push that connection closer? How do we make those strong ties? And you saw an example of that with the John Ruth example. But there's a lot more that we did using this data, using this kind of big data, to solve some of these problems. Volunteers knocking on doors. We spent a lot of time making sure that when someone knocked on a door, that was an efficient conversation. Meaning, if someone was a staunch Republican, we did not want to send someone to their door because they wouldn't care. We wanted to make sure that we valued our volunteers' times and we valued our people's times. And by people, I mean the US citizen. We don't want to waste anyone's time because this is a game of resources. Twitter. This is really funny. I love this. We sent DMs to a bunch of people who followed the president, and their minds were blown. We also sent it from the First Lady, and like Michelle Obama just sent me a DM. Like, it was blowing people's minds. And it was so exciting. Everyone knew, they knew that it wasn't really the First Lady or the President. But this got a conversation going about voting, about getting people out, and about really social and moving into the physical world that we wouldn't have gotten if we didn't do this. And this was a very, very simple thing. but using data to understand, who is the right person to send this to. And if you look, there's very few, I guess just Snoop Dogg. There's very few verified users, in this example. And, we of course sent them to some, but the idea was not the people who have the verified check or the people with lots of followers. It was the people who have the biggest influence within their network. The next thing we did is we asked a lot. So in a lot of our software, this also apparently has Latin on it, which is good. But a lot of our software, we ask simple questions. How many phone conversations did you have today? How many call attempts? And by asking, we really got a great response from our users, and they gave us a lot of data which helped us do the previously mentioned things, and it was really important. I've already talked a lot about testing and user experience. But what I want you to do is the two things I think are really important about my message here is, one, hire more diverse, and two, listen. I think that's some of the most important stuff. So that's pretty much it. Pretty easy stuff, right? Build a great team, practice failure, and listen. I think we're all going to be, shipping. I think we're good. Thanks, everyone.